One lady said to me, I can't drink water in the morning, it just makes me feel sick. So I began to investigate. Remember our why? Why is this so? I said, tell me how much water you drink when you wake up. She said, well, as soon as I wake up, I drink 2 full glasses of water. I said, if I drank 2 full glasses of water as soon as I woke up, I think I'd feel ill. And your kidneys and your body can cope with it much better when it comes little by little by little. How does God send the rain? Little by little by little. If it all comes at once in a torrential downpour, this is when the things get washed away, the soil gets washed away, the topsoil gets washed away. We've just had a big flood at Misty Mountain a few months ago. We had to stand back because huge logs were rushing down the creek, and the water was dark brown. Yes, it went a metre over our bridge. In fact, water coming too fast can cause devastation and destruction. Our house is a long way away from the creek, but our poor bridge, we couldn't get across our bridge for about a day. And then when the water went down, there were so many logs on our bridge, we had to get the chainsaw and clear it a little bit. My illustration is, your body can cope water much better, little by little by little. So I said to this lady that said to me, I can't drink water, it makes me feel sick. I said, I want you to try this. When you wake up in the morning, drink half a glass. Go to the bathroom, drink another half glass. Do we need to drink water? The million-dollar question. Why do we need to drink water? Well, let me give you a few pieces of information that will help you understand why we do need to drink water and why it must be water, not juice, not cordial, not soda drinks, not tea, not coffee, but water. We urinate out, we're going to say a quart loss every day. So we urinate out of our kidneys. We urinate out 1.5 quart loss. Out of our skin, and most people are surprised at this, we lose 0.5 of a quart loss. Out of our colon, we lose 0.3 of a quart loss. This is in 24-hour period. Out of our lungs, we lose 0.2 of a quart loss. So considering in a day, that is 2.5 quart loss. We need to be drinking at least 8 glasses of water a day. That's 4 glasses per quart. That takes us to 2 quarts a day when we have 8 glasses of water a day. What about the other 0.5? Well, that's coming in our fruits, in our vegetables, maybe herb teas, maybe a vegetable juice through the day. And that quart is important. That 8 glasses of water a day is important because every single body functions requires water. And water alone will do it. We had a pathologist do our program. He said, you'll find this interesting, Barbara. We did studies on caffeine, and we discovered that it takes, from 1 cup of coffee, it takes 5 glasses of water to make up for the dehydrating agents in a cup of coffee. Wow, that quite surprised me. But when you consider that, I think most Americans, most Australians are dehydrated. So I always ask a person, how much water do you drink a day? These are some of the answers I get. Not enough. Not much. I don't drink water or my legs swell. I don't drink water because I'm visiting the bathroom too much. Those last two answers tell me that the water's not getting inside the cell. What I've drawn here is the cell, and you'll see that the cell has a bilayered membrane around it. So how do we get the water inside the cell? To consider how we get the water inside the cell, we need to look at the 4 vital elements needed for life. So what are the 4 vitals? The most vital element needed for life, so we'll put a list here, the 4 vitals. The most vital element needed for life is oxygen, and I'm sure that's not a surprise. The second most vital element needed for life, whether you're a flea, whether you're a frog, whether you're a human, whether you're a plant, is water. No water, really, no life. You might be aware that in the middle of Australia there's a big desert. There's not a lot of life in the middle of Australia. There is some, and they've adapted to living in desert conditions. Most of the people that live in Australia are living around the edge, and around the edge there's more water. The third most vital element needed for life is sodium. The fourth is potassium. But what I'd like to look at, just for a minute, I'd like to look at sodium, because it is sodium that helps the water get inside the cell. Where you'll find the largest amount of sodium is seawater, and seawater contains 92 minerals. Of those 92 minerals, 30% is made up of sodium, and 50% is made up of chloride. So sodium chloride makes up the most amount. And so when the water is evaporated from seawater, the first crystals formed are sodium chloride. So what man does is he scoops up the sodium chloride, he bleaches it white, he puts aluminium with it, there's your table salt. So table salt has 2 minerals, sodium chloride. These 2 minerals are very harsh. If you were to inject sodium chloride straight into the veins of a person, you would kill them. These 2 minerals are so harsh that in table salt, they're killing the taste buds. God designed us to have salt the way He made it, in all of its wholeness, with all of its minerals. So the salt that we use is Celtic salt. Celtic salt is a hand-harvested sea salt, and Celtic salt has 82 minerals. Where are the other 10? Well, they're in such pico proportions, barely measurable, that it's inevitable that some are lost in the evaporation process. But 82 is a lot closer than 2. And there are 3 magnesiums in Celtic salt. There's magnesium chloride, there's magnesium bromide, and there is magnesium sulfate. Magnesium is a water-hungry molecule. And because it's a water-hungry molecule, it takes on the moisture. That's why Celtic salt is often a moist salt. One lady said, I don't like Celtic salt, it's just so wet. I said, they're the 3 magnesiums. We have a ceramic grinder that we sell and use in our health retreat. And we get enough Celtic salt to fill the grinder, and we put it in the oven and we dry it out, and then we put it in the grinder, and then it's easy to grind. But if we have a lot of rain, we know that that salt in the grinder is going to absorb the moisture, and we have to empty it out and put it in the oven again. It's a very wet salt because of the magnesium in it. So when you put a few crystals of the Celtic salt in your mouth before you drink the water, the mucous membranes absorb the minerals, it's taken into the blood, and once you've had that Celtic salt, just maybe a few seconds in your mouth, then drink the water, the magnesium pulls the water inside the cell. It's the quickest way to hydrate a body. Something else happens. As that water is drawn through and into the cell under the action of the magnesium, there's a little motor inside this membrane around the cell. And when the water rushes through, it causes the motor to begin spinning, and that gives us a unit of energy. So when you're a little tired, maybe mid-morning, mid-afternoon, have a little bit of the Celtic salt, have your water, and you'll feel a little bit of a boost of energy as the water rushes into the cell, causing that little motor to spin. We have 100 trillion cells in the body, and so this process is handy to know. So when most people are going outside to maybe have a cigarette or a cup of coffee, you can just have your Celtic salt and that glass of water. Because sodium chloride is such a harsh mineral, not only can it damage the cells that are on the tongue, even to killing the taste buds, and this explains why so many people that have a lot of table salt, they put so much salt on everything and they don't even taste it. What about Himalayan salt? Himalayan salt has 75 minerals, so not quite as many. It's still a good salt, but I like the Celtic salt because of the minerals in it. Lining the gastrointestinal tract are villi. We looked at villi a few times this week. Through the villi is the bloodstream. And I also mentioned that everything that goes into our gastrointestinal tract is not part of us until it's broken down to tiny substances and absorbed through to the blood. There's a receptor site here, and this receptor site has a carrier, and that carrier is designed to take the glucose through to the blood. But the carrier says, I will not accept you, glucose, unless you come with a molecule of sodium. I memorised this from the anatomy and physiology book, so I could give it to you from the horse's mouth. Sodium is the main transport system across the brush border wall and into the blood. No wonder sodium is the third most vital element needed for life. And we get our sodium, we get a little bit in our fruits and veggies, but really not enough. And I think you'll agree with me, avocado and tomato on some nice sourdough spelt bread, it needs that little bit of salt. And lentils, you can make them delicious by adding salt and some great olive oils and some fresh herbs. Keep it simple. In fact, I think the simpler, the better it is. Too long we've been told salt is no good. It is true that this table salt can contribute to high blood pressure. It is not a good salt. It is a refined salt. It's a very harsh salt. Let me show you what happens to a person that's having a lot of table salt and why it can boost blood pressure. In the membrane around the cell, there are sodium-potassium pumps. The highest concentration of nutrients inside the cell is potassium. The highest content of mineral outside the cell is sodium. And these sodium-potassium pumps, they're basically always working like that, maintaining the balance of sodium-potassium in and out of the cell. Where do we get our potassium from? All our fresh fruits and vegetables. There's a little bit of sodium inside the cell, but the largest concentration inside the cell is potassium. Let's say we've got someone who's not having any fruits and vegetables, and they don't realise the danger of table salt, and they're putting table salt on everything. Sodium levels are starting to rise, and osmosis and diffusion happens when the largest concentration merges into the lowest. So the sodium levels are going so high, potassium levels are dropping, so the sodium-potassium pumps are almost bypassed, and potassium levels are dropping. Sodium levels in the cell are rising. That causes the cell to swell. There's your high blood pressure. So the doctor is right. The table salt certainly is a contributing factor with high blood pressure. One little old lady was a little scared to tell her doctor that she was taking the Celtic salt. I said, just tell him you're on a mineral supplement, because that's what it is. It's that lovely balance of minerals. Seawater is called an isotonic solution because it has the exact same mineral balance and proportion as is found in the body. Dr. Robert Thompson, in his book, The Calcium Lie, he says that little bit of salt before every glass of water is just replacing the salt that you lost yesterday. What are all of these little tiny circles here? I think we all recognise the DNA in the nucleus. They're little mitochondria. When I draw the energy cycle in the cell, I draw it as if there's one energy cycle per cell, but not so. In a muscle cell, there can be hundreds, and the more you exercise, the more little mitochondria can develop. That's why exercise is the most powerful way to boost energy levels in the body. We have a book at home. It's called One of the Body's Many Cries for Water. It's by Dr. Batman Geheldich. He's an Iranian doctor. His story is fascinating. He was a political prisoner in an Iranian jail. And because he was the doctor, all the patients, or the inmates, I should say, of the hospital used to come to him whenever they had any complaints. And he didn't have any medications. All he had was water. So when anyone came to him for a problem, he'd give them a glass of water. And 15 minutes later, he'd give them another glass of water. And 15 minutes later, he'd give them another glass of water. So within half an hour, they'd had 3 glasses of water. He only did it because he had nothing else and he thought, well, it can't hurt them. He was surprised to see that all of these complaints began to resolve. People with migraines, after they'd had the 3rd glass of water, the headache's easing. People with stomach pain from ulcers, the pain was easing. He was shocked at what he was finding, so he began to document what he was finding. Eventually, the politics changed and he was freed, and he said, look, do you mind if I stay a little bit longer? I'm right in the middle of this fascinating research. And his book, One of the Body's Many Cries for Water, is a result of the findings of all the research that he did. He has presented his findings in medical journals. He's presented them in medical conferences. Unfortunately, they're not that popular because pharmaceutical company can't make much money out of water. His book has 2 other titles: Don't Treat Thirst with Medications. Another title is He's Not Sick, He's Just Thirsty. So always, first of all, try water. One lady said to me, I can't drink water in the morning, it just makes me feel sick. So I began to investigate. Remember our why? Why is this so? I said, tell me how much water you drink when you wake up. She said, well, as soon as I wake up, I drink 2 full glasses of water. I said, if I drank 2 full glasses of water as soon as I woke up, I think I'd feel ill. And your kidneys and your body can cope with it much better when it comes little by little by little. How does God send the rain? Little by little by little. If it all comes at once in a torrential downpour, this is when the things get washed away, the soil gets washed away, the topsoil gets washed away. We've just had a big flood at Misty Mountain. A few months ago, we had to stand back because huge logs were rushing down the creek, and the water was dark brown. Yes, it went a metre over our bridge. In fact, water coming too fast can cause devastation and destruction. Our house is a long way away from the creek, but our poor bridge, we couldn't get across our bridge for about a day. And then when the water went down, there were so many logs on our bridge, we had to get the chainsaw and clear it a little bit. My illustration is your body can cope water much better little by little by little. So I said to this lady that said to me, I can't drink water, it makes me feel sick. I said, I want you to try this. When you wake up in the morning, drink half a glass. Go to the bathroom, drink another half glass. But before you start each glass, have that little bit of salt. So a little bit of salt, half a glass of water. Go to the bathroom, another half glass of water. Get dressed. Little bit of salt, another half glass of water. Pray, another half a glass of water. And she said to me, you are right. She said, it doesn't make me feel sick when I do it like that. Some people don't like water, and so they think, I just got to drink it, so they just throw it down all at once. Please teach yourself to enjoy it by just having it little by little by little. Do an experiment on yourself if you're going to be home for the day. Have a mouthful of water every 5 minutes and you will be surprised how much water you can get into the body just little by little by little by little over the day. Just have that water always with you. Have a glass by your bed. Have a bottle in the car. Have it at your workplace. Just have it everywhere you go so that it's accessible and you can drink it little by little by little. How much water do we need to drink? We looked at 8 glasses a day, but I'll also give you an equation to work out, and this helps to know how much to give the children. So this is an easy way to do it. So 50 pound, 1 quart. So that's 100 pound, 2 quarts. So that's an easy way to work out how much the children should have. There was always a rule in our home, and still is, when my grandchildren come, no breakfast till you've had water. Now ideally you don't take the bull by the horns. So when my grandchildren get up, I say, here's your water. Don't forget to water your garden. My little grandson, Marky, he came in one morning and he said, it's all right, Grandma, I've watered my garden. I teach them about the lovely garden that's down in their small intestine where all those little friendly floras are. Dr. Batman Gehaldi, he showed that when you drink water, say you drink half a glass of water before breakfast, half an hour, let's say, before breakfast, what it does, that half an hour before breakfast, it thickens the mucosa wall. That mucosa wall that's lining the stomach is basically 99% water. And God designed that that thick mucosa wall be there to protect the lining of the stomach against the hydrochloric acid. The hydrochloric acid in the stomach is so strong it could burn a hole in your skin. And in that mucosa wall is sodium bicarbonate. And the sodium bicarbonate is there to neutralize any stomach acid that might try and get through that mucosa wall. So God put a lot of things in place to protect the lining of our stomach. If a person's dehydrated, the lining of the stomach is only small. And when the lining of the stomach is only small, there's not a lot of sodium bicarbonate in there. So it's easy for the acid to eat little holes in the lining of the stomach. Now, as we looked at when we looked at the microorganisms, the true cause of disease, we showed how whenever there's damage in the body, our own microorganisms can change roles and become bacteria to clean up the damage. It must have been about 15 years ago, I think, a group of doctors in Western Australia got a Nobel Prize for discovering that Helicobacter pylori bacteria causes stomach ulcers. So I'm going to give you an illustration to show that Helicobacter plays a role in stomach ulcer, but really is not the cause. So I'm going to give the story of a man who came to Misty Mountain. He came to Misty Mountain. He didn't really not want to be at Misty Mountain, but his wife had paid the full amount, so he came. As I'm consulting with him, I discovered that he'd had gut problems, stomach pain for 25 years. He was in his mid-50s. I said, have you taken any treatments for it? He said, yes. He said, at the moment, I'm on a different antibiotic every month to kill the Helicobacter pylori because the doctors feel it is Helicobacter pylori that's causing my stomach pain. What they can do now is really just a breath test which will tell the levels of Helicobacter pylori in the stomach. I said, how long have you been on this program? He said, this is my 5th month. So he's up to his 5th course of antibiotics. I said, with the last test, was it still there? He said, yes, it was. I said, are you interested in trying anything else? He said, no, thank you very much. I'm very happy with my medication and the course that I'm doing. I always respect everyone's choice. It is our God-given right to make our own choices. On the first night, the first lecture, this man heard about the body's ability to heal itself. And it will heal itself if you give it the right conditions. He came to me straight after the lecture, as did his wife, and they both said to me, that made more sense than anything we've ever heard. We've decided to let you have a go. We've decided that we're going to stop the medication and we'll let you try your stuff, so to speak. I said, great. So what I did was I gave the man and his wife, she had a similar problem, slippery elm. Slippery elm is the powdered bark of the slippery elm tree. And slippery elm, when you put it with water, it goes a little thick and it coats, soothes and lines the stomach, in fact the whole of the gastrointestinal tract. When I first consulted with this man, I asked him how much water he drinks in a day, and he said 2 litres or 2 quarts. Because he was a little resistant to what we were doing, I didn't push the subject anymore. I thought, well, he's hydrated. I just thought I'd put that bit in because that will make sense when you hear the end of the story. This man loved the lectures. He took a lot of notes. At the end of the week, when we consulted together, he said, I've got some good news for you. He said, I haven't had no stomach pain for 2 days. First time in 25 years. I said, that's very good news. But what he said next made me even happier. He said, I've worked it out. You see, we're the doctor. Try it. If it works, do it. If it doesn't work, keep adjusting till it works. Your body will speak to you. He said, I've worked out the problem. I said, I'm all ears. What is it? He said, I was drinking 1 litre of water with every meal, and I was drinking nothing between meals. He said, when I heard your lecture about the importance of not drinking with the meals, drinking between meals, he said, I made a decision not to drink with my meal anymore. He said, by the time I sat to eat my meal, I was always thirsty, so I drank a lot with the meal, and I always thought you have to wash the food down. I said, all you're doing is washing away your hydrochloric acid or diluting it so it can't digest properly. Let me show you what was happening. I'm going to illustrate because it's interesting to see what was happening with this man. He was dehydrated. He got up in the morning totally dehydrated, which is the most dehydrating time of the whole day, is when you wake up in the morning. He sat straight down to breakfast and, of course, drank with his meals. So the lining of his stomach was very thin. And because the lining of his stomach was very thin, the hydrochloric acid was burning little holes there, and his body's own microorganisms evolved into a bacterial form to clean up the damage. I think bacteria can almost be likened to maggots. In the war, if a man had an ulcer that wasn't healing, he would let the blowfly lay the maggots in the wound, and those maggots would clean up the wound. You see, they never eat live things. They only eat rubbish. And it is the same with these bacteria in the body. They're just cleaning up the mess. And every month he takes an antibiotic which kills off the Helicobacter pylori, but then the next one comes along. And when that's killed off, then the next one comes along. Remember, there's 10 times more microorganisms in our body than cells. There's lots there. There's lots of resources. And every time he ate a meal, hydrochloric acid was released. And one of the roles of hydrochloric acid is not just plays a role in digestion of protein, but it also is antifungal, anti-yeast, antibacterial. And so when it saw the Helicobacter pylori, it's about to come down and wipe it out when the man has a big drink of water. And what does that water do to the hydrochloric acid? It dilutes it. So Helicobacter pylori goes, whew, that was close, keeps chomping away. So here we are 5 months later, his 5th course of antibiotics, and he's still got Helicobacter pylori. When he heard the lectures, and he heard about the importance of drinking between meals and not drinking with the meals, his gut mucosa thickened. And then when he had his meal and the hydrochloric acid was released, the hydrochloric acid came down and wiped out the Helicobacter pylori. And at the same time, he's having the slippery elm, which coating and soothing the lining of the gut. He said, 25 years I've had this gut pain. He said, I can't believe it. All I had to do was change the time I drink water. What also was happening is because he was drinking so much water with his meals, his hydrochloric acid was low. And because his hydrochloric acid was low, he was not digesting his food properly, so he was getting bloating. So not only did he have the pain, he also had the terrible discomfort of bloating. So Dr. Batman Gehaldi, Dr. B we'll call him, he shows that the first place, a glass of water half an hour before a meal, the first place that it restores is that lining to the gut. Your liver makes hydrochloric acid, and it makes it from the water we drink. Yesterday, I had to drink 2 glasses of water to make enough hydrochloric acid for breakfast. And yesterday, I had to drink another 2 glasses of water to make enough hydrochloric acid for lunch. So that's 4 glasses of water just to make the hydrochloric acid. And so being dehydrated also reduces the amount of hydrochloric acid that we are making. Dr. Batman Gehaldi, he also discovered that the fluid around the joints, the synovial fluid, is 99% water. So if someone's dehydrated, they don't have as much fluid, and so the person can suffer from arthritis. That can be a contributing factor. It's not the only factor, but it is a contributing factor to arthritis, is dehydration. When we are not drinking enough water, the body goes into a form of drought management. He explains the drought management. He says the hormone that's released to help with the drought management is histamine. So when a person is dehydrated, the histamine levels go high. And if someone has an allergy, they're given antihistamines. Perhaps the allergy is purely because they're dehydrated. The brain cells, 85% of the brain is water. So when we're dehydrated, the brain cells shrink, and that hurts. Dr. Batman Gehaldi, he found that if someone had a headache or migraine, they just need water. Remember what he did? Every 15 minutes, another glass of water, another glass of water. That's not the only cause of a headache, but it's easy to use the process of elimination, and no matter what the problem, try water first. Little by little, get that water in. Dr. B also found that the lungs have a lot of fluid in them. When I say a lot of fluid, let me explain. Right at the end of each bronchiole is a little bunch of grapes that looks like this, and they're the alveoli. And it's in the alveoli where we have the gaseous exchange. So over each alveoli, there's a little blood capillary network. And when we breathe in, and these little alveoli fill up with oxygen, right at that split second, there's an exchange. The blood drops the carbon dioxide into the alveoli and picks up the oxygen, and then we breathe out the carbon dioxide. But Dr. B explains how there's a minuscule droplet of water in every alveoli. And because of the surface tension property of water, when we breathe out, the water enables that little alveoli to collapse. Then you can breathe in your full quota of oxygen. So if we're dehydrated, we're not getting as much oxygen as we could get if we were drinking adequate water. So water affects every single part of our body. The magnesium helps the water to come inside the cell. Calcium. Calcium's a very important mineral. We looked at that earlier, but it can't get into the cell by itself. It needs vitamin D. When vitamin D is present, the calcium is pulled inside the cell. And remember, the calcium's the king. All the other minerals piggyback on the back of calcium when it's taken into the cell. Glucose can't get into the cell by itself. It needs insulin. When insulin's present, glucose is pulled inside the cell. Now let me give you a scenario here. Let's say we've got someone, they're not drinking much water, and when they do drink water, they're not very happy because their feet swell. They're not having any greens. They don't like greens. The salt they're having is the sodium chloride, so they're not getting enough magnesium. So when they do drink, the water can't get into the cell. The person doesn't want skin cancer, so they stay right out of the sun. So they're lacking vitamin D, which means their calcium and minerals can't get into the cell. They're trying to lose weight, so they're on the high carbohydrate diet. They've eliminated all fat. Do you know what fat does? It gives the feeling of satiation or satisfaction. It gives that full feeling. That's why when people are on a fat-free diet, they're often eating all day long, lots of carbohydrates. Because he's eating so many carbohydrates, his pancreas is getting worn out. And because his pancreas is getting worn out, he's not making enough insulin, and so the glucose can't get into the cell. And the body says, what are we going to do now? So the body says, I know, we'll force it into the cell. What's that called? There's high blood pressure. High blood pressure can have many causes. High blood pressure can be caused because of dehydration, because of mineral deficiency, because of vitamin D deficiency, because of a high carbohydrate diet, because of margarine in the diet, which is a toxic fat which inhibits the insulin and the glucose getting into the cell. That's why the investigation needs to be begun. On page 127 of the Ministry of Healing, one of my favourite health books, the author says, in case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained. How do you determine the cause? You compare the person's life with these laws of health, and then often you see what the problem is. So the four most vital elements needed for life: oxygen, water, sodium, potassium. But remember, we need to take in sodium the way God planned us to. In Matthew 5, chapter 13, the Bible says, Jesus speaking, he says, ye are the salt of the earth. If the salt has lost its savour, wherewith shall it be salted? It is henceforth good for nothing but to be cast out and trodden under foot of men. Old English, I love the poeticness of Old English. If the salt has lost its savour, how does salt lose its savour? I'd like to suggest that table salt has lost its savour. It's only 2 minerals. It's lost all the other minerals. And when I was with my daughter a couple of winters ago in Wisconsin, I noticed that when it's snowing, they throw salt on the road to melt the salt so you can drive on the road. And I thought of that verse, if the salt has lost its savour, it is now good for nothing but to be cast out and trodden under foot of men. So I saw that salt thrown on the road, certainly under the foot of men and under the foot of cars. So maybe that is a place for the sodium chloride salt. So water's important. Water's vital. The body cannot function without it. So it's vital that we take the water in. You just got to find out how to get it in. Most people find it so much easier to drink it little by little by little through the day. You just have to have your water nearby. Your brain will work better, your stomach will work better, your colon will work better. A lot of people with constipation, it's because of dehydration, because one of the main functions of the colon is to take water out so stools are formed. So in dehydration, more water gets taken out than should be taken out, and so we're left with cement and rabbit pellets. And I was reading in a newspaper, it was a few years ago now in the US, I think it's your number 2 killer is colorectal cancer. Is this in a nation that has too much tea and coffee and soda instead of drinking pure water? It's water and pure water that must be taken into the body. One lady said, I drink a lot of water in my cups of tea. No. You see, tea has tannin in it, it has caffeine in it, and if you put sugar in that, that's 3 dehydrating agents. No, it must be water and water alone. It's really easy medicine, isn't it? To wash the dishes with a cup of tea would not get your dishes clean. It must be water. Water can be taken internally and water can be taken externally. How do we do water externally? Well, water is the best cleaner. But water can be used as a treatment. And hydrotherapy has been used for centuries And in the area of pain relief, hydrotherapy is almost without equal in the relief that it can bring. So in hydrotherapy, water is used in 3 forms. It's used in a solid, that's ice. It's used in a liquid, there's your water. And it's used also as a gas, there's steam. And I think most people who have had sinus problems know that a great way to bring relief is to put their head over boiling water and let that steam go up into the sinus areas. But what a lot of people don't realise is that it's vital that that treatment be end with cold. So you finish the steam and then you have a bowl of cold water, ideally with some ice cubes in it, and wipe over the face with the cool cloth. What cold does is it equalises circulation and it prevents chilling. At Misty Mountain Health Retreat, we have a steam sauna down by the creek. So you go into the steam sauna, you'll be in there for 15 minutes, you will get very hot and perspire a lot, and then you come out and dive into the mountain stream. It's very, very nice. Cool off and then come back into the steam. You can usually do that 3 times. What does steam do in that area? What steam does is it heats up the body, and when the body heats up, it starts to perspire more, the pores open, and a lot of waste is eliminated out via the skin. In fact, the studies on hydrotherapy are showing that up to 70% of body's waste can be eliminated via the skin when given the right conditions. What are the right conditions? Well, we stress to our guests the importance of being well hydrated when you go into the steam, because the body uses water to throw off the waste via the skin. And you can't hydrate yourself half an hour before the steam bath. So you start at the beginning of the day, little by little by little, to hydrate over the day, ready for the steam sauna. So there are a couple of ways that you can use the steam. Ice is one of the best anti-inflammatories that we have. So I was at Living Springs in Roanoke, Alabama a few years ago, and I walked through the forest on my way to work, and I got chiggers. You've heard of the chigger bites? It's like, apparently it's a little mite that gets under the skin. Well, I had about 8 bites, mostly on my legs. And they said to me, "You'll be scratching for a month." Well, I decided not to scratch, because I know that when you scratch a bite, you damage the skin, and when you scratch, you heat the skin up, and that increases the inflammation, and the inflammation feeds the whole situation. Yes, it feels nice to scratch, but when you finish scratching, the itch can be even worse, and you've also got a bit of pain. So how did I do it? I iced it. So every time they itched, I'd get a block of ice and I'd ice each bite. Sometimes it would take me nearly 10 minutes. I'd ice every bite. I had the ice on until it got quite painful. Then I'd move it to the next bite, and then the next bite. And then when I'd done a whole lot of the 8 bites, I'd go back again and do it again. And often I would have relief for 4 or 5 hours. Before I went to bed at night, after my hot shower, yes, the heat would increase the itch. I'd get a block of ice and I'd go over them again, and I would sleep all night. And in the morning, I'd do my morning walk, and yes, that increased the blood flow, and by the time I got back from my morning walk, they were itchy, and I'd run in and grab the ice, and I'd ice it again. In 24 hours, maybe I iced them 3 times, that's all. Within 2 weeks, I had no itch at all. And the people that live there, they said, "We've never seen them resolve so quickly." If someone has any bite at all, ice it. Just ice it. So on the side of the football field, they don't have hot water, they have ice. It's the best anti-inflammatory. And when there's an injury, apply ice. Because when there's an injury, the body tends to swell, and swelling is what causes pain. So get that swelling down by icing it. How you can ice it, remember what I was doing? I would ice it until it became painful, then I'd take it off. And then put the ice out again, gets painful again, then take it off. So you go on and off until the whole area can be quite numb. So ice can also be used in cases of eczema, psoriasis. With eczema and psoriasis, the skin gets very, very itchy. Ice it. Just keep icing it. No, it won't cure it, but it'll bring relief. But if you scratch it, the area can get damaged. It can even start bleeding, and the whole situation can get so much worse. Just ice it. Just ice it. One of the main causes of psoriasis and eczema is an allergy. It can be an allergy to, and I met a lady who was in a trailer, and she got terrible welts all over her body. She was lying in bed, she couldn't work, and one day when she was just looking at the end of her bed, the wall, she noticed this black mark, and every day the black mark got more and more. The other side of that wall was the bathroom, and there was a leaking tap. It was mold. So it was mold that gave her this terrible case of psoriasis. An allergy to mold, an allergy to chemicals, an allergy to wheat and dairy products can also cause it. But when you eliminate the wheat and the dairy, it can take up to 2 months before you see a result. But meanwhile, ice the area. Just ice it. So whenever you have an itch, ice it. Just ice it. It's often underestimated, the power of ice as a powerful anti-inflammatory. But one of the most powerful forms of hydrotherapy is the alternating hot and colds. So let me show you how this works. When you apply hot water to an area, the initial effect is stimulation. And I think we all know that if we're cold or a little cool and we get into a hot bath, it tingles, doesn't it? And that tingling sensation is the blood rushing to the area. And then eventually there is a depressing effect. Or you could say a slowing down of the blood movement. So with hot, when you first apply it, you get stimulation, but after 3 minutes, everything slows down, and then it gets to the depressing or the slow. With cold, it initially has a stimulating effect. Have you ever turned the hot water off on your shower and just had quick cold? It's very stimulating. But it only takes 30 seconds to get to the slowing down. So when you're using an alternating hot and cold treatment, you're going to be using the stimulating effect. And so usually it is 3 minutes hot and then 30 seconds ice cold. And that's usually done 3 times. In the area of pain relief, this is almost without equal. I'm going to relate a story. And this story happened when I was in the Papua New Guinea highlands. I was up in the interior. There was no running water. There was no fridges. And my guide was taking me around to see the little villages. And I noticed a man following us when we were walking around, and he had a bandage on his hand. So I said to my guide, "What's the matter with his hand?" And the guide said, he was hunting and an accident happened and the knife went through his hand almost out the other side. So he had a bad wound there. And I said to the man, "Can I look?" We could not communicate, but by body language and my interpreter. And it was very, very swollen. And I could tell by the way he was holding it, it was very, very painful. So I looked around and I saw at the back of the house was a little outside kitchen. There was a fire there. And I also looked a little further on and I saw a pipe coming out of the ground where they'd got into a spring. So I had water there. And I said, "Can you bring me 2 bowls, please?" So they brought me 2 bowls. Now, by the time we started doing this, we had quite a gathering of all the people in the villaging. They wanted to see what was going on here. So the first bowl, I made hot water. I had the kettle from the fire. And I made it as hot as he could stand. I got him to put his good hand in it, and it was the right temp. He put his painful hand in, and oh, it was too hot. And I understand that. So he put a little bit of cool in until he could bear it. So he put his hand in the hot water. And then I had another bowl that had cold water straight out of the spring. So because it was out of the spring, out of the ground, it was quite cool. So I did 3 minutes in the hot, and then I put his hand in the cold for 30 seconds. He was looking at me frowning. The people were looking around. They were frowning. They were intrigued. What's this woman doing? Before I put his hand back into the hot, I put a little bit of the boiling water in just to bring the heat up a bit, because I knew he would be able to handle the hot much more now that he'd been in the cold, and he could. And then I asked the many onlookers to empty the cold and get a fresh cold, because his hot hand going into the cold water had warmed it up a bit. I didn't have ice. At home I have ice, and that keeps it cool. By the end of the second hot, I noticed his whole body language was he's getting pain relief. He started to smile, and he's talking and talking and talking to the people around, and they all started smiling. There were no more frowns. I put it back into the cold water, and then I did a third hot. And by the time I was doing the third hot, his body language told me, I think his pain had reduced by maybe nearly 40%. And we finished with the cold. And he was laughing, he was smiling, he was chatting away in his language to the others. After doing this 3 times, I asked for a towel and we dried it. And I could see that the redness had reduced, the swelling had gone down somewhat. And so then I asked them, do you have any healing herbs, any leaves that you know can heal? And someone ran off and brought some green leaves, and I crushed it between my hands to bring the juice out, and then I put it on. I asked if anyone had a bandage. So someone had a bandage, and we bandaged his hand up. And I asked God to bless these simple treatments, this simple green juice, whatever it was. You see, green juice is healing and cleansing to the body. For the rest of the 2 hours I was there, this man just followed me the whole time. He was probably in his early 40s maybe. I don't know what happened to that man. Do I have to tell him what to do next? No. He knows. He experienced it. You see, we're the doctor. He experienced such incredible relief, and I'm sure that when it started to hurt again, he would do more hot and colds and more green leaves. And if it was very painful, he could do that hot and colds every 2 hours. Maybe as it eases, he starts to do it 3 times a day. What did we do? What happened? Why did that help? Well, when you have an injury, the blood tends to sit or pool in the area. And when you put it in the hot water, you are stimulating more blood into the area. And when more blood goes into the area, it pushes the old blood out. And when the fresh blood comes in, it has fresh supplies of oxygen, fresh supplies of nutrients, clean water, and also white blood cells. And so it's bringing healing to the area, and it's pushing out the old stagnant blood. When we apply the hot, we get a stimulating effect. And before it's got time to slow down, we put it in the cold, so we've got more stimulation. And before it's got time to slow down, we put it back into the hot. So can you see that we're using the stimulating effect of the hot and cold? Do you remember what I said before I gave that story? Hydrotherapy has been used for centuries, and in the area of pain relief, it's almost without equal. How long would a painkiller take to have an effect? By mouth, half an hour. He got relief. I could tell he had relief within about the first 10 minutes, and the whole procedure takes about 15 minutes. So water is not only important to drink it, but you can use water as a treatment for disease in the human body. Did you know that 80 years ago, nurses used to be taught hydrotherapy? I have their textbook. It's Knight's Hydrotherapy book for nurses. But it takes a lot of care and effort, which unfortunately they don't have today. But you can use it in your home.